Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
He's the man who spent decades as a thorn in the side of Britain's prime ministers.
Does she not agree that people sleeping on the streets of our capital city, being charged exorbitant rents, and children being brought up in bed and breakfast hotels is a disgrace to a civilised country?
Now he's standing for the top job himself.
The next Prime Minister of Britain, Jeremy.
So, is it crunch time for the Labour Party? There are some who are looking at this election and wondering whether this could be the death of the Labour Party.
This country cannot go on with its levels of inequality. You have to challenge the austerity programme.
I'm fed up with the levels of poverty in Britain.
He's running on a campaign of higher public spending and higher taxes on the rich. There'll be people at home saying, just acknowledge it. People will be shouting at the TV saying, of course you're a wealthy man on 137.
Well, of course I do. Of course I know that.
Good evening and welcome to the latest of our leaders' interviews. Tonight I speak to the Labour Party leader, Jeremy Corbyn, who wants his party to seize power from the Conservatives at the general election, making him our Prime Minister. So who is the real Jeremy Corbyn and what could he offer our country? Mr. Corbyn, lovely to see you.
Love to see you.
Come on in, come on in. We've got a chair all ready.
Which one's mine?
You're that side, if that's all right. Mr. Corbyn, thank you very much indeed for giving us some of your time. Did you ever dream of becoming Prime Minister when you were younger?
No.
What do you think about the prospect of it now? The thought of standing on the steps of Downing Street?
Exciting because of what a different government could do about poverty, injustice and inequality and the contribution we could make.
The left-wing Labour leader had a decidedly middle-class childhood. He was brought up in rural Shropshire with 3 older brothers in a home converted by his parents from a former hotel.
I met Jeremy when I was about 6. He lived in a big house. There was a lot of stuff going on in the house. They were fun and exciting and carefree. Perhaps bohemian is a good word to describe it.
Like his 3 brothers, he passed his 11+ and went to grammar school. And it was here the politics that have defined him began to take hold, including peace activism.
We would have been about 14 or 15, where everybody either joined the Combined Cadet Force, a bit of marching around, wearing a uniform and so on, or if they objected to that, they would have to do gardening. And I do have a picture in my mind of me marching along with a group of young men in uniform, and there, by the side of the road, part of the track, would be Jeremy doing some weeding. I wanted to join the army, I did. He didn't, and was determined to go in another direction.
Famously, of course, you don't like to talk about personal matters, but I think...
Is that why you've invited me here today?
Well, we'd just like to know a bit more about Jeremy Corbyn, the man. You're asking the British public to put you in Downing Street. You had a really idyllic childhood. Just tell me a bit about it.
I was the youngest of 4, which I know that as a parent, that the first child, the parents are always nervous. They always think the baby's about to have some terrible catastrophe as soon as it coughs and so on. You know, dead nervous. I was the 4th, and I think by that time my mum and dad was sort of totally laid back about everything.
4 boys?
Yep.
Running around in the Shropshire countryside, a big house with 7 bedrooms.
It was wonderful.
It's a pretty privileged childhood.
Yeah, it was wonderful. It was a very liberal upbringing, and I just remember it as a feeling of encouragement to always explore and do things. So, for example, me and two friends of mine, we must have been about 14, went off on a cycling and camping holiday from where we lived in east of Shropshire to the Welsh coast. We went all around on our bikes for, I don't know, a week, 10 days, and I'm not even sure if we found home at all.
No. So lovely,
these days,
freewheeling.
most parents, the idea of a child going off, they would want text messages every day, they'd want phone calls, and it was that feeling that you could do what you want. And I always had a total love of rural Britain and the environmental issues that go with it, and I get it from that.
But by the time he'd become a teenager, he was already showing signs of rebellion. You had also quite a privileged education, really, didn't you? You went to a private prep school, and then on to grammar school.
Indeed, and so I went to grammar school, which I didn't like because of its selectivity. I didn't like because of the aspects of implicit privilege that all the boys that went there were taught.
So that was a conclusion that you'd drawn even at that age, even though you were benefiting from these privileges.
Indeed, there was a school debating society, which I spoke at on many, many issues, including a debate to get rid of fox hunting in the middle of a fox hunting area. I didn't get a lot of support for my proposal, but I also proposed various motions about turning the school into a comprehensive. You look around you and you see injustice and you see privilege alongside it, and you think it's wrong, and so you do something about it.
After a period of time doing voluntary service overseas, he moved to London and immersed himself in political life.
When we first met Jeremy, it was at the Derbyshire Miners holiday camp in Skegness in 1972.
Keith Vanness has been a friend and political ally for 45 years.
At that stage, Jeremy was actually teetotal. He didn't smoke, he didn't go to restaurants. Jeremy doesn't like opulence, waste or any sort whatsoever, and we thought that time. I mean, Jeremy was an incredibly hard-working, keen activist, went to everything.
Chairman of Hornsey Constituency Party, Corbyn is a 33-year-old public sector union official who's been a member of the Labour Party for 17 years. He's a prominent example of the new breed of energetic and committed activists who've steered the Labour Party in London well to the left in recent years.
If you look at the causes that Jeremy stuck with for 20 or 30 years, and he was right and the establishment were wrong. Most people on the left didn't like the apartheid system in South Africa, but we took part in the non-stop picket at the South African embassy, and Jeremy got arrested. We came in for quite a lot of criticism until we got a phone call from Winnie Mandela thanking us for what we were doing.
And what of Jeremy Corbyn's road to the top of the Labour Party, which was, according to many, an unlikely rise to power?
Corbyn, is the Minister aware that there are many people in London...
He spent decades being a thorn in the side of previous Prime Ministers.
I'm sure the Prime Minister would join with me in condemning both the...
He rebelled against his own Labour Party when it was in government 500-odd times. So for him to have made this transformation to be not just the Labour leader, but a Labour leader who's almost unassailable from challenges within his own party is an extraordinary journey.
And that journey began with Labour's defeat in the 2015 election.
And now it's time for someone else to take forward the leadership of this party. So I'm tendering my resignation.
In the leadership battle, he lined up against 3 shadow cabinet ministers and won.
Jeremy Corbyn. 251.
He still didn't get the backing of critics within the parliamentary party.
Have you made up your mind?
I'm not staying in the shadow cabinet.
More than 20 members of his shadow cabinet have either resigned or been sacked.
His time as leader has been marked in the first year by
firefighting within the Labour Party. He had very few supporters among Labour MPs. Most people in Westminster thought that it would be a year-long thing and he'd be replaced by a more traditional Labour leader.
313,300. A year later, he saw off another challenge and increased his majority.
People realised that it wasn't a passing phase, that he'd earned the right to lead Labour into the next election, which meant that he had a period where he was able to start to set out his own stall.
The real question, though, he clearly has the support of most party members, but can he attract enough of the British voting public? And the stakes are high. Some critics say Labour risks being left in the political wilderness by a bad election result. There are some who are looking at this election and wondering whether this could be the death of the Labour Party. They're extremely worried about the future of one of Britain's key political establishments under your watch.
The Labour Party has its largest membership ever since I became the leader of this party. It's active in every single part of the country. We've had the most unbelievable torrents of media attacks on individuals and a failure to engage in the policy debate. This country cannot go on with its levels of inequality. You have to challenge the austerity programme. That is exactly what we are doing.
You've been a campaigner and a rebel all of your life. On the outside, agitating, why would people take a gamble on that as a leader at such a crucial time?
If they want their children to get decent education, if they want a health service that's there and works for all, if they want job opportunities for their young people, if they want a government that's serious about environmental sustainability and a mix of energy production, then it's a Labour government that can deliver that. And I am very determined that at the end of the first term of a Labour government, we will built a lot of houses. We will have secure hospitals. We will have an expanding high-tech industries where government is prepared to invest. It's actually not that different to what successive German and Scandinavian governments have done for a very long time. It's just a neoliberal agenda in Britain has gone so far that anyone who says anything about state investment is suddenly portrayed as some kind of extreme position. It's not. It's sensible. It's rational.
Shortly after our interview on a day of high drama, the extent of the Corbyn agenda was revealed when a copy of the party's draft manifesto was leaked.
Leaks happen in politics. I think what matters is the policies themselves, and the policies, whether it be asking the rich to pay a bit more money, investing in public services, investing in housing, health, education, and public ownership of utilities. Most people don't look at the tittle-tattle of politics. Most people just say, do I like the policies or not?
I think some of them, like the introduction of more trade union presence in British life, are very Corbyn-esque because they sort of take us back to this time where there was more rights for workers, before Thatcher's time, and that will remind many voters of a more old-fashioned Britain. But I actually think there are things in there, such as the £10 minimum wage and scrapping university fees, that look ahead because they help young people and they help people who are on low wages who want to get ahead.
The proposals include renationalising the railways, the Royal Mail and the National Grid. There are also promises to build new council homes, as well as strengthening workers' rights and scrapping tuition fees.
This is, without doubt, the most directly, classically left-wing manifesto that the Labour Party, or indeed any major British political party, has presented to the country since 1983. We don't know exactly how this is going to go down with voters, because individually some of the policies poll very well, but taken as a whole package, it can start to look less and less credible, and so we really don't yet know which side of that line people are going to fall.
Labour have a very moderate set of proposals. For example, that whilst 95% of taxpayers won't pay any more tax, the top 5%, who are doing pretty well at a time when we've gone through a lot of economic turbulence, are going to be asked to pay a little bit more money. And that money will be invested in health, in education, in housing, and in elderly care.
Labour's plan to transform Britain will mean rebuilding our National Health Service and social care services with the funding they need. It also means building 1 million homes to rent and buy.
The challenge for Labour is because the bar for Labour to show that actually, you know, that these are fully costed is always set a lot higher than the Conservative Party. So I think as long as they show we can cost these policies, that this will be good for the economy, then I think you'll find that a lot of people will have a lot more confidence in them.
The economy is still rigged in favour of the rich and powerful.
Labour would end the Conservatives' austerity programme, financing their plans by borrowing billions and, they say, by taxing big business and the wealthiest 5%.
When Labour wins, there'll be a reckoning for those who thought they could get away with asset stripping our industry, crashing our economy through their greed and ripping off workers and consumers.
That was an extraordinary speech in Manchester. You were really angry, weren't you, when you were talking about a day of reckoning?
Yeah, because we had a banking crash in 2008. We've had 7 years of austerity. We have a government that's planning to take another 70 billion off the tax bill for big corporations and the very richest over the next 3 years. And we've had now 6 years of frozen wages in the public sector. We have 6 million people earning less than the living wage. And we have a Sunday Times rich list that's grown by 14% in its global value in 1 year alone. I think anybody would be angry if you look at those figures.
Commissions last night, Mr Corbyn.
Jeremy Corbyn publishes his tax returns annually. He earns an MP's salary and an additional sum for being Labour leader, around £137,000 a year. We know that the top 5% of earners in this country, those earning above 80,000, will have to pay more tax. Do you consider yourself a wealthy man?
I consider myself adequately paid, very adequately paid for what I do.
Correct me if I'm wrong, because of you're an MP and you're Labour's leader, you're on above 130,000.
Yeah, what I do with it is a different matter.
Yeah, but do you consider yourself a wealthy man?
I consider myself well paid for what I do, and I am wanting to say to everyone who's well off, make your contribution to our society.
People at home saying, just acknowledge it. People be shouting at the TV saying, of course you're a wealthy man on 137.
Well, of course I do. Of course I know that. Of course I know that.
Just say it. You consider yourself a wealthy man.
No, I'm not wealthy because of where I put the money, but I'm not going into that. Okay.
But you are paid £137,000.
I'm very well paid for what I do, and I acknowledge that, of course I do. Listen, I'm well paid, and I want our society to be much fairer. I get very angry about the number of people who are very badly paid, who lead very insecure lives. It's surely a simple moral question. Do we allow this kind of injustice to go on, or do we do something about it?
Under a Labour government, once a Brexit deal has been fully negotiated, there's a promise of a meaningful vote for MPs in Parliament. I know you are very keenly campaigning on a broad canvas of issues, core issues to Labour like the NHS and education, but you know that the key issue is Brexit.
The referendum is a decision. Article 50 triggers that process. The whole point is how we negotiate Article 50, because we're not going to be in the EU.
So we are definitely out of the EU at the end of those 2 years.
Everybody knows that.
It's hard, isn't it, when you've got people on the doorsteps that aren't sure about where Labour is on Brexit.
The point I'm making is that we're leaving the EU, we're not leaving Europe. We have to have a tariff-free trade access to Europe. We must protect the conditions that we've achieved through membership, working conditions, environmental and consumer, but we also have to make sure we don't go down the road of becoming some kind of tax haven on the shores of Europe. We've got to be economically consistent with Europe. Otherwise, what happens to all the manufacturing industry in Britain?
What controls on immigration would Labour bring in?
There'd be fair immigration. Obviously, the free movement is intrinsic as membership of the EU, so that is going to become a different issue in whenever the final departure takes place, say 2019.
So what would happen in terms of the numbers of people coming here?
There would be immigration, there would be emigration.
Yes.
Because we have skill needs and skill shortages, there's family reunion issues.
But would you bring it down, let's just say, to tens of thousands?
I'm not going to put any figures on it. Theresa May has done that this is now the third general election. She's promised figures, and none of which she's come anywhere near to achieving. I think it's unwise.
Would there be controls on immigration, and what would the consequences be?
Clearly, free movement ends when we leave the European Union, but there will be managed migration, and it will be fair.
And what of the defence of the realm? Despite his lifelong opposition to nuclear weapons, Jeremy Corbyn's manifesto promises to renew Trident. He said he'll appoint a Minister for Peace if he wins power, but insists he does not have a pacifist agenda. People look at what you said on the security issues, defence on this country, and it worries them that you stood on a platform with former IRA prisoners. It worries them that you haven't been completely transparent on whether you would be happy to back up a NATO country should it come under threat. What's your response to that?
My response is you have a responsibility to make sure everybody is safe and secure in this country. You have a responsibility as a government to do everything you can to bring about a more peaceful world. I have met many people around the world during my life who are frankly disgraceful human rights abusers. I've been prepared to engage. I've attended many meetings of the UN Human Rights Council. I've travelled to many parts of the world where human rights abuses are appalling because I want to see an end to them.
Will you review Trident again?
We will.
If you are
there will
the
be
next
a strategic
Prime Minister?
defence review, as all governments have done when they come into office, which will look at all aspects of our defence strategy.
Including Trident?
Nuclear will be included in that. The bigger threats we face are actually, I think, cyber attacks and I think irrational acts of terrorism.
But can Labour fight back from disappointing local election results? There are people speaking now of Labour potentially losing up to 100 seats, around that figure, at the general election.
The election results varied. Yes, we lost seats. Yes, we failed to win Tees Valley and very narrowly west of England and narrowly lost in Birmingham. We won handsomely in Manchester and Liverpool.
Yeah, you lost Glasgow. That had been in Labour's hands for 70 years.
Then we won Doncaster.
Yeah.
So we did lose. I accept that. But there are places that we did well.
But the question is, if Labour lose, yes or no, will you stay on?
We're not looking to lose anything.
No, but I know you're not looking to. I know you're obviously not looking to. But will you stay on? Will you stay on as Labour leader? Yes or no?
We are fighting to win. I'm proud to lead this party. I want to lead this party to win the general election. That's the only question at the moment. Are we capable of winning the general election? Yes. Am I determined to do it? Absolutely.
Mr. Corbyn, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've been getting away with it all